Hello, welcome everybody to B&N's Midday Mystery, where you get the chance to put your favorite mystery and thriller writers in the hot seat and ask them all your burning questions about their latest page turners. I'm Heather Gudenkauf, the author of 9 thrillers, including The Overnight Guest. But we are all here today to talk with author Joshua Moehling about his hit debut thriller, And There He Kept Her, which also happens to be Barnes & Noble's mystery and thriller pick for February, and a book that New York Times bestselling author Julie Clark calls a dark and complex mystery that will consume you. I thoroughly agree. Joshua, you were born in Texas, and his mother's career in the Army moved his family all over the United States and Germany. And after attending college in South Dakota and in Mankato, Minnesota, Josh moved to Minneapolis and has worked in the medical device industry for more than 20 years. And There He Kept Her is his first novel in the highly acclaimed Ben Packard series. So Joshua, thank you for being here. I am so excited to be able to chat with you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, Heather, thank you very much.
Yes.
Heather and I did a couple events together this summer. My first chance to have an event outside of the state of Minnesota was down in Iowa, and I got to meet Heather, and we did a couple events in Cedar Rapids, and you made it painless. So I'm super happy that we get to do this together again.
Yes, I'm so excited to be able to share my love for the book, and I know that others love it so much as well. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Just a little bit about today's format for discussion. Josh and I will chat for a little bit here, and then Barnes & Noble was nice enough to gather a bunch of questions that you have as viewers that you'd like for us to talk about. So we'll make sure to cover those. And if you have any questions as we go along in the chat, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. So Joshua, let's get started and tell us a little bit about There He Kept Her.
Yeah, so And There He Kept Her, it is set in Minnesota, in a rural kind of northern part of the state. And it opens with 2 teenagers breaking into an old man's house looking for prescription drugs. And what they don't realize is this old man isn't as harmless as they think he is. He's got a really dark past that he's kept secret for many years. And at the end of the first chapter, a gun goes off and things just go terribly wrong for everybody involved. Our hero is Deputy Ben Packard. He actually grew up in this small town of Sandy Lake. His family had a cabin there, and he spent a lot of summers there growing up. But there was a tragedy in the family, and they stopped coming to this area. But now Ben Packard is back. He has taken a job as a sheriff's deputy. He's was formerly a police officer in Minneapolis, and so he's come back to this small town. He's looking for these 2 kids, one of whom he is related to. And Packard is, I think, kind of one of the things that makes probably this novel a little bit unique is that Packard is a gay man working in law enforcement, living in a small rural town. And so he's new in town. He's still trying to figure out how he fits in, what the mood and the tone of the place is. And now he's got to find these 2 kids.
Yeah, and I have to tell you that the novel had me pins and needles the entire time. You've introduced us to this, amazingly intriguing, likable character in Ben Packard. And, as I was reading, I was really blown away because you've written this really gritty story. It's very gritty and dark in places, but you also have this quality to your writing that's really beautiful. And, as a writer, I must say I'm in awe of that. So and it's really hard to believe that this is your debut book. So congratulations on that, Joshua. And, you talked a little bit about Ben and his unique situation and coming back to the town where he spent a lot of time in his youth. What is it about small towns in literature that is so intriguing to us as readers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm intrigued by small towns because I have a lot of connections to small towns. We have to talk about Wagner here, Heather,
Yeah,
in a
we
minute.
do.
My dad was born and grew up in a small town. We spent our summers there as kids with our grandparents. I went to college in a small town. We have a cabin in a small town, and I'm just really intrigued by what it takes to make a life in a small town as opposed to a bigger city. What do you do for work? What do you do for relationships? How do you uh, kind of grow? How do you see yourself in the world outside of this small town? And I think small towns also can be like a boiling pot, full of conflict and old grudges and secrets. And I think in some ways, people in a small town kind of need to go along to get along, and it can leave a lot of stuff under the surface, kind of simmering, waiting to explode.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite quotes from the book, you say, "Don't expect Sandy Lake to wrap its arms around you and make it easy. It's not summer vacation. It takes hard work to make life in a small town." And you talked a little bit about that. It isn't easy because there are these connections and these histories that people have in small towns. So Ben Packard, while he has a connection, he is an outsider.
An outsider, yeah, yeah. Especially kind of the town that I set this in, and you see this a lot in Minnesota. I think probably other states where people have second homes or cabins, and you go there and you're on vacation, and it's just fun at the lake and hanging out at the bar, and then you get to go home to where you really live, but the rest of the people actually live there and every day and are making their living there, and you're a visitor. And that also can set up some tension between the locals and the people who are just in and out on the weekends.
Right, the interlopers. So
Yeah,
yeah, we do have a connection, don't we? I mean,
yeah.
even before we connected, while we were in the process of, preparing for our event together, we found out that we have a connection to the same tiny town of like 1,400 people in Wagner, South Dakota. I was born there.
Yes.
Tiny town. Nobody's ever heard of Wagner.
So yeah, when I was getting ready to meet you this summer, I went to your website and was looking at your bio, and the first line of your bio said Heather was born in Wagner, South Dakota. And I think you can mention Wagner, South Dakota to 10,000 people, and 9,999 won't know what you're talking about.
No.
But my dad was born in Wagner, South Dakota. My grandparents lived there, and my brother and I spent every single summer of our childhood in Wagner, South Dakota.
Wow.
So I was just like, is my computer broken? Why is it saying Wagner, South Dakota for
I
Heather, where
know.
Heather's from?
I
Like,
know. I know. And I lived there for just a short time, but it makes me wonder if, maybe at the grocery store, I don't know if our paths ever crossed, but like if our folks' paths crossed,
yeah,
isn't
yeah.
that funny? What a small world we do live in.
It's too crazy to even put it in a book. Like if you and I tried to write a book about two thriller writers who have a connection to a small town in South Dakota, 1,000 people, I think our editors would be like, come on, nobody's going to believe that.
I think we should try though. Wouldn't that be a fun collaboration?
Let's do it.
We have some ideas. Okay, I have got another favorite quote. They're just so full of it. The book is so full of great quotes. It's when Packard and Shannon are chatting, and Packard says, "I've got no secrets, just untold stories." Tell us about that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Packard has his own baggage. I think that's kind of what um, helps make a character interesting. There's a million detective stories or a million police procedurals out there. You need your person to have their own backstory. And so, as I mentioned, Packard is a gay man. He works in law enforcement, which is known to be fairly conservative. he's moved to a kind of a rural conservative community, and he's kind of laying low. Like I said, he's trying to figure out how he fits in. He's got kind of a high visibility job. He's had some tragedy in his own life recently that kind of spurs the move to Sandy Lake. He's had a relationship that ended in the other person being killed, and that's just turned his world upside down, and he's dealing with a lot of unresolved grief and looking to start over. But he's not going around announcing to the whole entire world, he's not wearing a pride shirt and wearing it on his sleeve. So he's not really keeping secrets. He's just keeping to himself, I think. And, he tells his story to people when the time is right and, when they need to hear it. And part of this book is him maybe realizing that more people know about him than he first thought, and him having to accept that and try to be more comfortable with it.
Right. And as he is in law enforcement, and I read somewhere that you attended a citizens academy. Is that what that is? A local citizens academy? Did you get tased? Could you tase somebody?
So it's funny. I did it in 2021 when it was COVID, and it was only virtual. So it was all Zooms and PowerPoints. But just last week I started it again. They invited, right? I didn't invite me. I applied again, and so now they're in person. And so Monday night we went down there and saw the patrol deputy and got in the car, and they had the canine deputy there, and we saw him do a bunch of stuff with the dog. And so in a couple of weeks we're going to the training center and the shooting range. So I'm super excited. I'm hoping it'll give me a lot more good details to put in future books now that I've had some more of this hands-on experience.
I've never done that. I need to add that to my list as well. So early on, we meet Emmett, who is a particularly terrifying character in so many ways. As awful as Emmett is, and you'll tell us more about him, for some reason, and it's the power of you as a writer, I found myself rooting for him at one point. Tell us a little bit more about Emmett, because he's an awful person. Awful.
He is an awful person. So one of the things I was thinking about as I was writing this book was, I didn't want to write another book about a woman being kidnapped and raped and murdered. And, that book has been written a bunch of times. And so I was trying to figure out how to kind of have that scenario, but not have that be the main action of the plot. And I started thinking about, what if that's something that this guy had done a long time ago and he never got caught? So what happens to these killers, when they get old and they go from being the one who's preying on people to being victims themselves because they've aged, they're not in good health, they're different things, that they're compromised by. And so, Emmett is a reluctant, at this point in the story, when the book opens, Emmett is a very reluctant kidnapper. He's wants a teenage girl locked in his basement, like, I don't know what, it's the last thing he wants, but he's got to protect himself and his past. And, but he also had to still be kind of terrifying, and the threat of, something awful happening still had to hang over the whole story. And Emmett is terrible. But then I introduced another character named Carl. I was like, what Emmett is so infirm. And I started about wondering, is there anybody who knows what Emmett got up to? And does Emmett have any friends? And I wouldn't really call Carl a friend, but he's somebody that Emmett can rely on. And Carl is kind of an even bigger monster than Emmett. So when you put the two of them together, Emmett starts looking not so bad in comparison.
The lesser of two evils in the moment, right?
Yeah. And then adding Carl also created this interesting triangulation between Jenny, the girl locked up in the basement, and Emmett and Carl. In any triangle, you're probably going to end up with 2 against 1 at some point. And so that it puts Emmett in an interesting position.
Right. Well, before we get to, we have so many audience questions. I'm so excited to get to them. But before we do that, we also found out we have something else in common.
Yeah.
So those of you in the Midwest, maybe especially in Iowa, Minnesota area, you'd be familiar with Ragbrai, a bicycle race across the state of Iowa. You are an accomplished participant in Ragbrai. I am one who failed miserably. So tell us what Ragbrai is. You'd be better at explaining what that's all about.
So Ragbrai is sponsored by the Des Moines Register, which is the big newspaper in Iowa. And Ragbrai stands for the Register's annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa, Ragbrai. This year is the 50th anniversary of Ragbrai. It was started by two reporters for the Des Moines Register who decided they were going to ride their bikes across Iowa. Maybe 50 people went with them the first year. And now about 20,000 people ride it every year. And it's the biggest organized ride in the world. And it goes a different route across Iowa every single year, from the Missouri River on the western border to the Mississippi River on the eastern border. And I've ridden the whole thing twice. It takes a week, Sunday to Saturday. And then the last few years, I've just done the last 3 days because it gets to be a little bit long. What did you do?
So I did 30 years, at least 30 years ago, 2 legs, 2 days, could barely walk for like 2 weeks afterwards. Like I said, failed miserably, but it is so much fun. So are you going this year?
I'm thinking about it. Have you seen the route?
I have. I can't recall it off the top of my head though, but it looks like a fun
close
one.
to you.
Yeah.
Des Moines is one of the overnight towns, and then Tama, Toledo, and then Coralville.
Oh yeah, that's right down the road.
And then it
You know
ends in
what? If you
Davenport.
do it, I don't know that I'll ride, but I'll buy you a drink.
All right.
There we go. It's a deal. It's a deal. And so, and we talk about bike riding. And actually that was leading to another question I had about riding. I know for me, I'm a hiker. I walk, I hike, and I swim. And that's where I get a lot of my ideas and brainstorming. Do you find the same thing when, or what activities do you do that really kind of help, get the juices flowing?
Yeah, I am a big cyclist, and I live in Minnesota, unfortunately, which is not great for cycling in the winter. My bike is sitting right here beside me, and I'm just looking at it lovingly for about 5 months out of the year. But yeah, in the summer, I'm on the bike every single day. And it can be very relaxing, and it kind of puts you in a mental state to think about things or not think about things, as you're biking. And, sometimes it can just kind of free your mind, and stuff will occur to you even when you're not maybe actively thinking about your novel. But yeah, it's a great hobby to have, and I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. Oh, sounds good. Well, we will have to talk more about Ragbrai and meeting.
Okay.
And so let's get to the questions, because there are a ton of viewers who have some questions for you. And we have one from Gretchen, who wants you to tell us about the first book or story you ever remember writing. And how old were you?
So first of all, I saw the list of questions. I know this one came from Gretchen Anthony, who is in my writing group. She is an accomplished novelist in her own right. She's got 3 funny novels out on your same publisher, Heather, I think, Park Row.
Yes. Gretchen.
And we've been in a writing group together for several years, and she read And There He Kept Her over and over and over again. And a lot of the good that's in this book came from Gretchen helping me with it. For Gretchen's question, when it was in first or second grade, and we had to write a story about St. Patrick's Day, and the teacher gave us this shamrock cut out of construction paper, and then she gave us this one little strip of paper about this long to write our story on. And I wrote a story about a leprechaun, and the entrance to his kingdom was in an old tree stump, but it was going to close if he didn't get back there before St. Patrick's Day. And this kid was trying to help him find the tree stump. And I had to ask for more and more strips of paper from the teacher, and she had to tape them all together. And the strips of paper went all the way down to the floor, and then came back up and went all the way down to the floor again. And all the other kids just wrote theirs on one little thing.
So you got caught the bug early, and even then, you were writing fast-paced thrillers because everybody wanted to find out what happened when the leprechaun got back, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So you've lived all over. I mean, with your family, you traveled a lot. Where did you get the idea for the book? And is it based on any true events or even your travels or any locations you've been in real life?
Yeah, I would say that Sandy Lake is, like I said, I have kind of connections to a lot of different small towns, and Sandy Lake is probably just an amalgam of all of those small towns. I wrote this book. The seed of this book actually came from a book that I wrote before it, which is also set in Sandy Lake. And I won't go into the plot, it doesn't really matter. But in that book, there was a sheriff's deputy who was gay, and he only appeared on 2 pages. And he was just kind of the butt of this joke between these 2 main characters. And then that was it. I sent that novel out, and a handful of agents read it, and they said, "Oh, it's all right, but it's got big flaws," and blah, blah, blah. So then I was trying to figure out what I was going to write next. And I was thinking about this sheriff's deputy who was gay in a small town. And I was like, I wonder if there's something there that I can do with that. And, at the time I was writing the other book, I just didn't even realize the seed I was planting. And so I plucked that guy out of that book and gave him a crime to solve and a backstory. And that's where it all came from.
Yes, and that question came from Terry. So thank you, Terry, for that. And which brings us, you plucked Ben out of, a scene from an earlier work, and now it's grown into one novel. And everybody on the chat's been asking about this. Will there be more Ben Packard books in the future?
Yes.
What do you have coming for us?
So, the second book is done. It will be out August 15th. It's called Where the Dead Sleep. I'm really excited about it. I'm very proud of it. This book, and Mary Kepter, took so many years and so many revisions to get right. It almost killed me. And when I sat down to write Where the Dead Sleep, now I knew who Ben Packard was. And so that part was easier. And I had a lot of fun coming up with the crime in that book. And if you've read the book, if you read In There Kepter, that part of Ben's history is the thing that sent his family away is his brother disappeared years and years ago from Sandy Lake. He went out one night on a snowmobile and never came home. And they found the snowmobile in the lake, but they never found his body. And so there's an arc about Ben's missing brother that is going to take 3 books to resolve.
Ooh, so at least 3 Ben Packard books.
Yeah, I'm writing the 3rd one right now, and I have contract for 4 books, so we'll see if the 4th one is another Ben Packard novel or if it's something else. But
yeah, wonderful. Yeah. More Ben Packard, more Ben.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
Always looking for a new series, and he's such a great character, so memorable, and yeah, I love it. So Lainey wants to know, do you have a process? Do you map out your storylines and timelines and, bring them all together? So in the writing world, we call writers who outline everything plotters, and then authors who don't, pantsers, meaning they write by the seat of their pants. Which one are you?
Yep. So for In There Kepter, I was a pantser, and that's why it took probably 14 revisions and 5 years to write In There Kepter, because I just didn't know where it was going from one day to the next. And you get so far and you want to make a change, and then that's a thread you've got to pull back all the way from the beginning, sometimes, and it takes a lot of revisions. So they say you have your whole life to write your first novel, but then once you have a contract, you don't have that luxury of time anymore. So
there are deadlines.
Yeah, I was a plotter on the site on Where the Dead Sleep. I plotted that out pretty extensively before I got started, and it really helped.
Did it?
Keep it moving along. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a pantser too, and I'm trying to become a reformed pantser, because I run into much of what you've talked about. I run into, write myself into corners and have to go back. So in the book I'm just starting, I'm trying to plot it out. So I'll let you know how it goes, and I might be calling you for some tips
All right.
as well. So,
Hey, Heather, I should ask you a question right here. I know a lot of people want to know what's coming next after the overnight guest. There's probably a lot of your readers on here.
oh gosh.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I do. I do have a new book coming out next winter, and it's yet untitled. We haven't settled on the perfect title for it yet. So we're working on that. But basically, what it's about is 5 strangers from across the United States are invited to take part in a competition reality series, similar to, I like to say, Survivor / Big Brother / Squid Game. And when they get there, they realize it's not what they expected at all. So there's lots of secrets, lots of danger, and lots of fun. So it was a lot of fun to write. So
Nice.
that will be coming out next winter, and hopefully we'll have a title soon.
Is it set in Iowa or not set in Iowa?
Well, it's not. So that's a little departure for me, because most of my novels are set squarely in Iowa, a state I love. But I have characters who were part of the story takes place in Iowa, but we step out to kind of greet these more global characters who all come together in actually Napa Valley. And so it should be, it was a lot of fun to write. So hopefully readers will enjoy that too. But I'll have more on that.
I can't wait.
As more info comes in about that. So, and talking about writing and plotting and pantsing and all that good stuff, what does your writing day look like? We have Lawrence wants to know, how many hours a week do you write?
So I have a day job, and I work from home 100% since COVIDian, or not COVIDian, since COVID. That's the company I used to work for. Yeah, since COVID, I work from home 100% of the time. And, I'll work till about 5 o'clock, and then we'll have dinner and relax for a little bit. And then usually probably around 8, I try to come back to the office and try to write until about 9:30. I try to do that most nights a week. And then if I'm really cooking, there's a library walking distance from our house, and I like to go there. There's this little brick prison cell of a study room that's really helps keep me focused, and I might spend an hour or 2 there on the weekends. So yeah, probably 10-12 hours if I'm really keeping to my schedule.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to be so disciplined in that free time. So you're able to fully, and you do that, fully immerse yourself in the project. Abina wants to know, what was one of your hardest scenes, or we don't want you to give anything away, but one of your hardest scenes to write in, and there he kept her, and why? Because, and I agree, there were so many scenes that were so visceral in this book, I can imagine, but they needed to be in order to convey this fear. Well, did you have one that was harder than others?
I think probably those first couple of scenes between Jenny and Emmett, when he's got her locked up in his basement, and just those initial interactions were, they were difficult to write. And the other thing is that I don't know a thing about 16-year-old girls. They're not in my realm of the circles that I move in.
Oh, I've had 16-year-old girls, and it doesn't matter. You don't ever really know.
I mentioned Gretchen earlier, and so she was a big help. She's like, this is what a 16-year-old girl would say or think or do. And Laska, our other person in our group, I'm in a group with 2 women, Laska and Gretchen, and they were both big helps on figuring out 16-year-old girls.
Yeah, that could be challenging for sure. Oh, this is a great question. This is from Cheryl, and she wants to know, did you enjoy drawing up your protagonists, or your bad guy, or your bad or your antagonists more? So which one was more fun to write, like the Ben Packard or
Mhm.
the Emmets and Carls?
I think, yeah, it's hard to compare them. I mean, you've got to get Ben Packard right if you're going to write more than one book about him. So he was, I think, the hardest, getting my arms around him, at least for the first book, and kind of thinking about, I didn't know what was going to happen in books 2 and 3 when I was writing this, but, just trying to set him up to be somebody that I want to continue to write about, was a lot of work. And then the bad guys are always fun. Where do they come from? What do they want? Well, how did they turn out to be this way? Um, I think it's more fun to write the bad guys,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's it. We want the characters that we love to love, like the Ben Packards, who are reliable and, they surprise us, but we can count on them. And then
Yeah.
as readers, we want to be surprised or shocked by the bad guys in the book. So yes.
Yeah.
And you have some doozies in there. He kept her. So do you get writer's block? Because Marcia wants to know, do you ever run into where you just, you get in your space to write and you sit down and there's just nothing?
I mean, there are better days than others in the writing chair. I think you would probably agree, Heather, that there's days when you just can't type fast enough. And there's days when you just sit there and scroll Instagram when you should be writing because
Yeah,
you're stuck. I think part of just breaking through writer's block is just being willing to write terribly and get something down on the page. Plotters versus pantsers, that's all. We can talk a lot about that, but you've got to have a draft to actually do the real work of writing a novel. And getting a crappy draft written and allowing yourself to write a crappy draft, I think, can help with writer's block. And then that gives you the place to work from to make it not crappy.
Yeah,
through the revision process.
Giving yourself that freedom to let go and just get everything on the page, and then that's where the really hard work begins in the revision. Yeah. That said, I'm always looking for new craft books. Do you have a go-to book on writing or that deals with writing that you return to time and time again?
So I finally read Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird. I think that's a book every writer wants to read, or that's a book that you always hear about writing is the one that you should read. And I felt guilty because I hadn't read it for so long. I finally read it maybe a year or two ago, and she talks about giving yourself permission to write the terrible draft. And she just talks about, showing up every day or, regularly to do the work. And I thought it was a great book. A book that I like about plotting, I'm looking at my bookshelf, Story Genius. Oh my gosh, I have to look at her name.
I'm writing this down, by the way, because I'm always
okay. Story Genius. I thought this was a really good book for getting to the whys, the why of your story and the motivation of your characters. And she's got some really good exercises in that book that I thought it's a really fun book to read too. So I recommend that one.
I will check that out for sure.
Do you have one that you like?
Oh, Bird by Bird for sure is one that I return to over and over again. I've started to collect some more. There's, Twyla Tharp, who is an artist in many different ways, a dancer. There's a book on creativity that it kind of steps out of writing, but into different, I guess, genres and mediums. But, just looking at art in a different way and writing it just opening your mind to looking at things in a different way is that's helpful. But yeah, Bird by Bird for sure. On Writing by Stephen King is another one I go back to over and over again. And I think we found out we both have Stephen King in common too. We both
big fans
of him. So if he's listening, hi Stephen. Yeah. And so, you have this great advice for writing, but what's the best advice you've ever received in general? And that's from Jessica. Do you have any piece of advice that anybody's given you through your life that you follow?
I had a mentor that I met at the Loft. Her name was Mary Gardner, and she taught the Working on Your Novel class. And I took that class 3 times. I was writing 3 different novels, and I finished all of them. They were terrible, the first 2 especially. And
You're not.
but I came to Mary. I'd gone to school for a while to get my MFA in creative writing, and then I dropped out. And then there was probably 6, 7, 8 years that I didn't write at all. And I was starting to wonder, am I going to be a writer or not? This has been the dream since I was a kid, but writers have to write. So I started working on this novel, and I ended up taking Mary's class. And Mary told me that I could write, and I believed her. And she's a short little 70-something-year-old woman, and she'd published 5 or 6 novels. And she was a trip. She wasn't there to tell you your book was great. She was just there to teach you what she knew and encourage you to keep writing. And she told me I could write, and that was the kind of the encouragement I needed at the time to keep going.
Isn't that amazing? One person can make that trajectory different for you, and how important that encouragement is. That is huge. It's huge. We have one in the chat from Christy, and she wants to know who some of your favorite mystery writers are.
So I kind of backed into writing mysteries. Like I mentioned I wrote a book before this. First novel I wrote was a YA thing. And then I kind of wrote kind of like a thriller before this one, set in Sandy Lake. And then I wrote In There He Kept Her. I was reading some mysteries, and there's 2, giants in the field that are from Minnesota, like I am. And so I read a lot of John Sanford, and who writes the Lucas Davenport Prey series. And I've read a lot of William Kent Kruger, who writes the Cork O'Connor series. I just read a book by Alan Eskins, another Minnesota writer who writes thrillers. Forsaken Country is his new one. I really enjoyed that.
Minnesota, you guys have this like very rich literary.
Isn't it crazy?
Very rich literary state.
Yeah.
Great.
It must be something in the water.
I think so.
But yeah, as I was writing In There He Kept Her, like when I would get stuck, I was like, well, how does John Sanford move it along again? Or how does William Kent Kruger move from, chapter to chapter, scene to scene? And I learned a lot reading those 2 guys.
Yeah, those are great examples. Those were some books that you read, I assume, as an adult. Did you have any books that you loved as a child? Kathy is wondering about that.
So I read every Hardy Boys book ever written when I was a kid. I think I graduated from Hardy Boys to Agatha Christie's. I read every single Agatha Christie book. A while ago, I was realizing that I read a lot of books about mice and rats when I was a kid. So there was The Mouse and the Motorcycle, Beverly Cleary, I think.
Yeah.
There was Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, which I loved, and Stuart Little, E.B. White. There must have been a trend in publishing in the whenevers. Books about mice and rats. I read a lot of them.
Those were good. Those were all good. Those were all classics. Very classic. So when did your love for reading begin? When did that start for you?
I think my mom taught me how to read at a very young age. She's probably trying to keep me occupied and out of her hair. But I could read when I was 4 or something. And my mom, I remember just telling us that she was trying to get me into kindergarten at 4 years old. And we went there and they tested me, and they said, well, he can't tie his shoes and he doesn't know his left hand from his right hand. And my mom was like, I don't care. He can read. He's going to school. And so my mom, I think, had a lot to do with that. And then once I could read, there was no stopping me.
And just that advocacy. I mean, she saw that in you and wanted to foster that. Does anyone in your family read your books now?
I think everybody's been reading my books.
Yeah.
They better be. My family is
You
the
hope,
only people
right?
I expect to read my books. Everybody else gets a pass, but
That's
my
right.
mom is my biggest fan.
Hmm.
I wasn't sure she was going to like this book at all because it's pretty dark in spots and it's got a lot of bad words. And
Yeah.
my mom loves it. And she tells everybody at church that her son is an author, and she like just passes the book all around. And
So
my
proud.
dad and stepmom and my brother and sister, and yeah, they're all very proud.
Yeah. Well, they should be. That's so cool when you get that, the family, I'm sure on the street corners talking about the books and in the bookstores. And so where were you when you first saw your book in a store? And what was that like?
So my amazing publisher, Poison Pen Press and Source Books, got my book in Costco, which I thought was crazy.
Mhm.
And so like the first pictures of my book in the wild were from friends who texted me and said, I just saw your book at Costco. And then my first time seeing it was actually at Barnes and Noble. I went
Yeah.
to the local Barnes and Noble, and there it was on the shelf in the new releases. And I was like, oh my God, it was amazing.
Well, and now with the Barnes and Noble mystery pick of the month, you get to walk into any Barnes and Noble in the United States, and
It's
there's
crazy.
a special table with and there he kept her books, this little table, and not even a little table, it's gonna be a big table, and there's a special placard. Have you been, now be honest, have you been able to go to as many Barnes and Nobles as you can just to see that?
Yeah, so it's funny when the paperback came out, the day it came out, I was in Arizona on vacation, and I ended up in Phoenix the last couple of days, and I was like, yeah, it'd be great. My book will be on tables, the Barnes and Nobles in Minnesota or the Barnes and Nobles close to my house, but nobody knows me in Arizona. And I went to 5 different Barnes and Nobles in Phoenix and signed all of their books,
Oh,
and it was just crazy to walk in these stores and see tables and posters and stacks of my books. I just couldn't believe it.
there's nothing like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was an
So
amazing
exciting.
experience.
So exciting. Okay, I think we have time for one more question here. And the question is from Leslie. And she wants to know, have you met Stephen King or William Kent Kruger or John Sanford? And if you haven't met them, who have you met? That are some writers that it's been tough with the COVID,
Yeah.
situation to get out and meet people. But have you had the chance to meet any of authors you enjoy?
So I've been to a few readings that Stephen King did
Mhm.
in person, and one of them he had a signing line. He doesn't do signings very much. He'll sign a whole bunch of books in advance, and you can get him luck of the draw. And one of them, this was probably a decade ago, he did a signing, and when it was my turn in the line, he stopped and told me a joke, and I just was paralyzed that Stephen King was actually talking to me. I just stood there kind of dumbfounded. I don't even remember what the joke was. And then he signed my book and handed it to me, and I walked away. Um, I've been to some readings. I've been to so many readings. Minnesota just brings so many great authors. And so I've got a ton of signed books. I've met Kent Kruger. He doesn't remember meeting me, but he was doing an event and signed a book for me, and he's written a very generous blurb for my second book. So I'm hoping that we cross paths in person here again before too long, so I can thank him.
Amazing. Oh, and I think we do have time for a few more. Amy wants to know what are you currently reading right now? Are you reading anything right now?
So yeah, I just finished that Alan Eskin's book when we were on vacation, and one of the great things about being an author is you get early review copies to read. And I'm reading one, but now by another Source Books author, R.J. Jacobs. This is How We End Things. RJ's got, I think this is like his 4th kind of thriller that he's written, and this one's dark academia. It's really quite good. That's what I'm reading now. And I just got the new John Irving, The Last Chairlift. I'm looking at it right here holding up my computer. And
Yeah.
I've read every John
I
Irving
love
book.
John Irving. Yeah, I'm excited to read that one as well. He's one of my favorites as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, so great. I met him once, by the way,
Did you?
at an Iowa wrestling meet way back in the 90s.
Oh, that's right. He's
Yeah,
a big
yeah.
Iowa guy.
Yeah, it was
Yep.
pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, the writing and publishing world, you've got a book under your belt now, one on the way out or coming out soon. Has so many, and publishing has so many facets to it. There's the actual writing, the waiting, the revisions, the waiting, the promotion, and so much more. What do you find the most rewarding in that process? And maybe what do you find the most challenging?
I mean, this whole experience has been rewarding. It's been my dream to be an author since I was a kid, and it was a long road getting here. And all I wanted was to look on my bookshelf and see a book that somebody thought was good enough to publish, and that was about as big as my dream was. And the reception that And There He Kept Her has had to be a Barnes and Noble monthly pick, the reviews that it's gotten, the people I've connected with on social media through Bookstagram and all of that, it's been beyond. It's not a dream come true, because I never dreamed that it would be this successful. And so a lot of that credit goes to my publisher and the marketing and everybody working behind the scenes on this. But it's been an incredible experience, and I just kind of sometimes I feel like it's happening to somebody else, because it's I still have my day job. I still have to sit in my chair and write the next book, but all the success that the book has had has just felt amazing, and it's been hard to wrap my head around.
Well, it's so well deserved. And There He Kept Her is just a gripping, just all immersive read. And the fact that we get more Ben Packard books down the road is very exciting. So when does the new one come out?
August 15th. You
August
can
15th.
pre-order it now. It's on. I know. I saw it on the Barnes and Noble site. So
Okay.
if you liked the first one, I would love if you pre-order the next one. That would be awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. Joshua, it's been such a pleasure to be able to visit with you again. I know readers will love meeting Ben Packard and the folks of Sandy Lake, Minnesota. And thank you, Barnes and Noble. After the discussion and this discussion, we want everybody to know that you can pick up copies of And There He Kept Her at Barnes and Noble or online, anywhere you want. It's the Barnes and Noble February pick, mystery and thriller pick for the month. And it's been such a treat to be able to visit with you. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you so much, Heather. I really enjoyed it. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.